Good evening. After all the studies we've already been going through, we worked our way from the mark of the beast to where we are right now, talking about the no buy, no sell. We went through why we need to get out of the cities, the warnings that have been there all through the Bible, that at the end of the world, we need to be out of the cities because God's judgments are going to be poured out on the cities. Now, when you're looking for a country property, what is the criteria? What is the criteria according to the Bible, according to the spirit of prophecy for this country property? That is what we're going to talk about today. What is the criteria? We're going to be laying it out. We're going to be going through the quotes and picking out the identifiers to know exactly, is the place you're looking at or going to look at fit the criteria to be a proper, self-sustainable country living property according to the spirit of prophecy and the Bible. Now, before we start, I just want to have a quick word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you so much that we can come on this Sabbath day, that we can study. We have concerns and we have questions. We want to know exactly what it is that we are preparing for and what size of ark and what the ark is supposed to look like, our antitypical ark that we are trying to build and get ready for the time of trouble that is coming. Give us wisdom, put your words in my mouth and have them not be my own. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So there's a lot of questions. There's a lot to cover here. So we're going to jump right in. Now, I'm going to start with some quotes. And I'm just going to share my screen here so that you all can see. And we're going to be walking through exactly what this looks like for the proper criteria of a country property. So we have this quote first, which is kind of the warning. It's the propellant for us. We're living in the very last days of this earth's history, which I think all of us agree on. I'm going to read just the blue here for the sake of time. The destruction of these cities is a warning to us to prepare for what is coming upon the earth. So we're going to be seeing these things, and they're a warning for God's people to be taking this seriously, that destruction is coming. And once the four winds are fully let loose, we're going to see the full effect of God's judgments. God gave direction that an ark was to be built for those who desired to be saved from the coming destruction. So God's the one who commanded them to get ready, and he's commanding us to get ready. When he warns us of things that are coming to the earth, when he warns us of judgments that are meant for the wicked, he does not want us to partake of them. If we do partake of them, then we're going to be counted with the wicked. So that's not what we want. We want to know, how do we avoid this? How do we not get swept away in the modern flood that is coming? And what is our ark supposed to look like? And I want to tell everybody right now that this is live. If you have questions, put them in the comments below or on the side, wherever they are. And we'll try and answer as many as we can at the end of the study. If you know anyone who's trying to get in the country, looking for property, wanting to know what's the criteria, share the link with them right now so that they can jump on and they can learn the criteria. And if they have questions, then they can ask. Okay, so jumping down to the next part of the line here, he was about to clothe himself with vengeance and execute his judgments against the transgressors of his law. And this is what God is going to do now. He's going to put on his clothes of vengeance, and we need to be in our ark so that we aren't affected by the plagues and by the time of trouble that is coming on the earth. Now, here's our first quote that is adding to the criteria. Again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities. Well, that's point number one. Away from the cities, in the country, into the country where they can raise their own provisions. That's another one. For in the future, the problem of buying and selling will be a very easy one. Is that what it says? That's not what it says. It says a very serious one. And that's why this whole series is dedicated to the final events, so we can see exactly how things are coming and how we are supposed to prepare. The final countdown of events is underway, and we need to be ready. We should now begin to heed the instruction given us over and over again. Get out of the cities into rural districts where the houses are not crowded closely together and where you will be free from the interference of enemies. So now throughout the study, we're going to have sort of a running list of the criteria of your country property. So here we have some of the first points that we've run into so far. Away from the city, able to raise provisions. And then this, encompasses a lot of things. Needs to be rural. And these are all direct statements from the quotes. Okay, that's what's going up here. We're just adding them up so that at the end we can see the full criteria list. Rural, houses not crowded. Okay, so they can't be close together. Free from the interference of enemies. That's a fascinating one that we can get into more about. He wants us to live where we can have elbow room. There's another one. His people are not to crowd into the cities. He wants them to take their families out of the cities, that they may better prepare for eternal life. In a little while, they will have to leave the cities. If we place ourselves under objectionable influences, can we expect God to work a miracle to undo the results of our wrong course? So if we stay in the city, do we expect God to put a magical bubble around us and perform a miracle that we won't receive the destruction that's coming on that city? No, indeed. Get out of the cities as soon as possible and purchase a little piece of land where you can have a garden, excuse me, where your children can watch the flowers growing and learn from them lessons of simplicity and purity. No, indeed. Get out of the cities as soon as possible where you can have a garden. Now, this little piece of land, people say, 1 or 2 acres, plenty. Is that what she meant by little piece? Well, as we continue down, we're going to find out what a little piece of land is. So we just added 2 more points to our criteria. We need to have elbow room and we need to have a garden. Now, some of these are going to feel like they overlap a little bit, and that's okay because it's going to give us more descriptors on how we can actually define some of these things. So some of them will be similar, but I'm adding them here anyways so that we get the most complete picture by the end of this. For this reason, I see the necessity of the people of God moving out of the cities into retired country places where they may cultivate the land and raise their own produce. Thus, they may bring their children up with simple, healthful habits. I see the necessity of making haste to get all things ready for the crisis. So now we have, it needs to be retired country places. So these need to be quiet. They need to be farther out. We need to have arable or cultivatable land. Now, that word cultivation is a very interesting word. Usually that's in connection to some sort of draft power, something that's mechanized to actually work the land. So whether it be horses or oxen, donkeys, doesn't really matter. That's what was used in that day. There was no such thing as rototillers. There was no such thing as tractors or quads, ATVs, anything like that. So they had to do it all with animal power. Raise produce. So our produce needs to be from us. And we need to get all things ready for the crisis. We need to get all things ready. So whatever you think you might need for this crisis, it has to be able to be produced, and it has to be able to be secured and placed and stored on this piece of property. So it can't be so small that you can't fit it. It needs to have suitable area that you can actually do these things, whether it's wood, water, growing space, storage space. All of these things need to be on that piece. And if I'm going fast, I apologize. There's quite a few things to go through, and I'm sure there's going to be tons of questions, which we'll get to as many of those as we possibly can. So put them in the live chat if there's any more questions. To parents who are living in the cities, the Lord is sending the warning cry: gather your children into your own houses, gather them away from those who are disregarding the commandments of God, who are teaching and practicing evil. Get out of the cities as fast as possible. How much more emphasis do we need? Get out as soon as possible. Get out as fast as possible. Make haste. This emphasis here is not slowing down, it's speeding up. And if you're believing that we're in the final movements and that the end is really close, we need to be pulling out all the stops and get out of the city as fast as possible. Why? Because at an hour you thinketh not, destruction is going to come on these cities. And we don't want to be part of the destruction. We need to be out of the area of destruction. So we need to be in the country, away from these things. Parents can secure small homes. Doesn't have to be a large mansion in the country with land. So the emphasis is on the land. That's the most important part here. For cultivation, where they can have orchards and where they can raise vegetables and small fruits to take the place of flesh meat. Well, there we get into the health message now. So this is a plant-based, self-sustainable farm, which is so corrupting to the lifeblood coursing through the veins. On such places, the children will not be surrounded with the corrupting influences of the city life. God will help his people to find such homes outside the cities. And I want to just add emphasis to this last line, because people always say, well, I don't know how. I can't. There's no way that I'll be able to do this. Well, God said he will help his people to find such homes outside of the cities. I apologize. Something is poking me in the eye. And this is a way that you know that this is live. God will help his people find homes outside of the cities. If you want to claim that, please say amen in the chat. Okay, so now we have some more criteria. Our list is building. This is great, because if anybody's wondering what are the criteria, we're building the list right here, right now. Land, orchards, vegetables, and small fruits, which I would classify as things like berries. Now, I'm just going to read the blue for the sake of time. His people, the Lord desires his people to move into the country where they can settle on the land. Doesn't that sound like one of the settlers? They're coming into this wilderness and they're settling there and they're building their house and they're having the gardens and they're, all these things. They're developing the land. This is a very fascinating way of describing that. And raise their own fruit and vegetables, and where their children can be brought in direct contact with the works of God in nature. Take your families away from the cities is my message. If you have children, you have no time to lose. You have time to lose. Actually, you need to move now. If you have a family, everything in your power needs to be to get them away from the demoralizing, the evils of the city. It doesn't matter what you're doing. You need to get as far away as possible. That is the command from God, to take your families away from the cities. If you think that you're doing them a service by being in the city, you're not. If you're trying to be here for a certain reason, because they need the school, they need the activity, they need the whatever, their family, anything, you need to move, and you need to be in a place where they can learn from God through nature, and give them the things that they need in order to grow and be actually caring about God and not getting influenced by all the wickedness that comes with the city. And don't bring the city into the country. Don't give them Wi-Fi and a phone and an iPad and a laptop and everything else where they can access all the evils of the city. That's not the point. You get them outside and they start climbing trees and they build stuff and they run around in the bush and they do the things that kids are supposed to do outside. And that's the way that God designed it. That's the way that they were in Canaan. When they got to the promised land, everyone had a big property where their family was. We need to be getting out of the city. Now, here's the next points that we have just added: able to settle / homestead. So that means it needs to be self-sufficient. It needs to be able to run self-sufficiently. And please, if you've never done that, don't make assumptions on the least common denominator type property of that this is possible on 1 or 2 acres and you can grow enough food on 100 square feet. I'm sorry, it's not possible. There's no way, absolutely no way that you're able to do that. Not even if you had all the GMOs and chemicals in the entire world, could you do that. So we need to be, unless you did like a skyscraper of vegetables or something like this. So we have to have all the context in order to make this possible. So it has to be something that you can settle on and that you can homestead. The next thing is direct contact to nature. So this shouldn't be something where there's no nature. There needs to be nature. You need to see the wild animals. You need to see the birds. You need to see the plants. You need to, be out where there's not people as a barrier between you and nature, where you can just go from your property into nature. Your property should be in nature anyways, but this is all part of the package, and we're building all these points. It will then be time to leave the large cities, preparatory to leaving the smaller ones for retired homes in secluded places among the mountains. And these are homes in the mountains. These aren't fleeing to caves in the mountains. Big difference. A lot of people miss this point. So when we look here, this is part of the criteria. The property we're looking for is that it's secluded and it's in the mountains. So when we're going to be fleeing to the mountains, you can't flee to the mountains if you're not close to the mountains. So you need to be in some sort of a distance where you can flee from your property to the mountains. And it needs to be in secluded places. If it's not secluded, it's not the right place. And as the council went on throughout the years from when it was first given out of the cities, is the message that God is now giving, to later, it was farther and farther as time went, because the cities get bigger, the transportation gets faster, the impact of war gets larger. All of these things are factors on how close and where you need to position yourself in the country. So there was more and more counsel given. Now, a lot of this we can find in the Bible as well. So let's go to Genesis chapter 19. And if you have your Bibles, I would love for you to join in your Bibles. I have it on the screen for those who can't have their Bibles at the moment, but If you have them, say amen, and please turn there. Genesis 19, verse 12 to 14. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides son-in-law, and thy sons, and thy daughters, and whatsoever thou hast in the city? Bring them out of this place. That was the command that God was giving. For we will destroy this place. And do you not think for 1 minute that if Lot was in that city, a magical miracle bubble would be put around him? Absolutely not. If he did not heed the counsel, he would have been destroyed with the rest of the sinners in that city. Because the cry of them is waxing great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord hath sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get ye out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. Let's continue down just to the highlighted. And while he lingered, so he was hesitant. Then he said, Look not behind thee, neither stay. This is the angels now saying, Escape for thy life. Look not behind thee, neither stay thou in all the plain. Escape to the mountain, lest thou be consumed. And then, here's the problem. Lot was compromising and debating. I cannot escape to the mountain lest some evil take me and I die. What if I move to the mountains and I starve? What if the garden fails? What if there's a bear? What if there's something that's going to kill me and I die in the country? Then I can't minister. I need to minister to the people. Behold, now this city is near to flee unto, and it is a little one. It's just a village. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. This was a compromise that Lot was trying to make to the angel, and it didn't go very well. He lost his family because of it. He hesitated, he debated with God, and that city was next destroyed. So here we see some more criteria from the Bible. It cannot be flat plains without mountains. And that seems redundant, but a lot of people will think that, well, mountains is not literal. And so, it just means wilderness. But here it's specifically saying, don't stay in the flat plains. Go to the mountains. The mountains is where God can protect you. Father, okay, we're switching gears a little bit. So just to wrap up on this, we have a huge list of criteria so far. So it's getting to a really nice size, and we're getting a lot of factors introduced away from the city, able to raise provisions. It needs to be rural. Houses not crowded, closely together, free from the interference of enemies. Let's break some of these down a little bit just so they're more understandable. So away from the city, that should be pretty plain, that it cannot be in the city. Now, your defining factor of what city is going to mean is maybe bias, depending on who you are and what your experience is with city. So we need to give more defining factors than just out of the city, because some people think the suburbs is out of the city. Some people think if they have a 1/4 acre lot and they're not in a high rise, but they're in a nice house, that's not in the big, busy city. What is the definition of this? And we're going to be targeting what is a large city. We're going to give you the answer to that. We're going to give you the answer, how many miles do you need to be from the city? What's the distance? All this stuff. Now, another one of the criteria was able to raise provisions. So, able to raise provisions. Provisions are all sorts of things, whether that is your water, whether that is your food, your wood, whether that's building material, whether that is all sorts of things. We need to be able to produce this from our own piece of land. Now, that even includes, and a lot of people aren't thinking about this, how are you going to start seedlings if you don't have potting mix? You need to be able to make your own potting mix and compost and all of these things. So you have to have all of this in mind. And Noah would have had all of this in mind when he got on the ark and he came to the world after it was destroyed. It looks like a mess. And he's taking the seeds and he's having to start growing food and he's having to do all these things after he gets out on this barren world. He had to know exactly what to do and have everything in place. So all of this has to be able to be done on your property. Now, it has to be rural. This is an important piece too. Not in a town. We're not talking town. We're talking rural. Houses not crowded. So that and we're going to see some more quotes. Even if you have people partnering on a property, you don't want to be within shouting distance, and you don't want to be able to, throw a rock into the window of the next house. That's crowded closely together. You need to be free from the interference of enemies. For me, that can be a lot of things, even things like the big GMO farms. In the prairies, you have the wind and it just takes all those chemicals. It takes the pollen from all the GMO plants. And now all your plants are cross-pollinated with GMOs and you have a mess. And that's not what we want. We want to be isolated to the point where we have a protective barrier from all these enemies and things that are going to be encroaching on our ability to actually sustain ourselves through this time of trouble, just like Noah did. He had to make the walls of that ark thick enough that when everything was bashing up against the sides of that ark, they didn't break through. So all these things had to be considered. Elbow room, you don't want to be crowding each other. You want to have good space. You need to have space for a garden. And that means you need decently flat land that has good access to sunlight. Yes, you can terrace. Yes, you can all of these things. It's a lot. I would not recommend getting a property where it's so steep that you can't have a flat garden. If you can terrace in large sections, okay. But if you're doing a bed and if you're terracing a single bed, that's pretty steep. That gets really hard in order to produce a lot of food without having extra labor. So you want to be considering all of those things, and you want to have good sun exposure. You don't want everything to be on the north-facing slope or something like this where you don't get sun, especially if you're in a cooler area, which the mountains are usually cooler. You want that exposure. Even if it's not perfectly north, it doesn't have to be north-facing hard, but at least if you have good sun exposure, that's the key. Getting good sun exposure and arable land for producing. Retired country, this isn't busy country. Cultivatable, you need to have area that is able to be cultivated. And if you're using draft animals or some, because you're no buy, no sell, you have no fuel, you have no parts, you can't do an oil change, all of this stuff, then you want to be able to maybe turn the animals around or, something simple like that. Raising your produce, and you need to learn how to do all of these things. Noah took 120 years, and we don't want to take 10 minutes to learn some of these skills. We need to be willing to take the time to learn them. God's given us time. He's given us over 100 years to perfect these skills. And I'm telling you now, you still have time. You need to make haste, and you need to move instantly. But you have time if you move quickly. God will help you to understand a few months, where it took someone like me or others years to learn the skills. We need to get all things ready for the crisis. Not thinking that one we can, get away with, or we're going to MacGyver something in the crisis. We need to have land. We need to have orchards, vegetables, small fruits. Be thinking of all these different things, but don't rush and do it all at once. And then it becomes a mess. You want to systematically go through. And we'll be looking in some of the later studies on what some of those systematic process look like and how to start each of those. Able to settle / homesteadable. So if you think, wow, if someone came upon this land and they were a settler and they were driving up with their wagon, is this look suitable? Would they say, this is a nice spot? Direct contact to nature. Is it peaceful? Do you hear the birds? Do you hear the nature singing? Secluded places among the mountains. Are you close enough to the mountains where if you had to flee, you can flee to them? Or are you days away if you needed to flee? Because that's too far. Not the flat plains without mountains. Okay, so now we're switching gears a little, and I want to show you what Ellen White's personal garden looked like, because you probably never seen Ellen White's personal garden, and we're going to take a look at it right now. My throat is already dry, not because the study's been going that long, but I've already been speaking for several hours today. We had our study in the morning, and then while we were doing that, we recorded some new presentations. If you haven't seen already, our study on the Middle East and Bible prophecy, 2 parts have been released. We have 3 more parts going and probably another one. So it's going to be around 7 parts total to that study. And it's been a lot of effort. And so my throat is getting close to the end. So pardon me if I have to take a sip of water. Father has excellent health. He has worked hard on the place here. Put in more than 1 acre of strawberries. And this is their personal garden. Some raspberries, more than 1 acre of potatoes, several acres of corn, 50 hard maples, many peach trees, pear trees, and long rows of pie plant. I have been gathering up shrubs and flowers until we have quite a garden. I love how she says that. She describes this massive garden, or what today we would think of as a massive garden, and says, we have quite a garden. And this is what her and James were doing with their personal garden. So let's see what this actually comes out to. 1 acre of strawberries, over 1 acre of potatoes, 3 acres of corn, half an acre of maple trees, and half an acre of other things. So 6+ acres of garden. That is what their personal garden was. And she didn't make it sound like this was overextensive. We have quite a garden with all of this. And we need to think in different levels. We're so used to doing no gardening that when we talk about any gardening, it seems massive. And I think part of the problem is we have lost a lot of the skills in order to actually garden in that scale. We don't have the knowledge, we don't have the tools, we don't have the understanding of what this actually looks like. And that's something that we've been working on here for years. And that's been part of my study for close to two decades, is what this is going to look like. How can we actually grow enough to be sustainable? And is it possible? And I would say 100% yes. It is possible. There's certain things that need to be put in place. And then once they're in place, and once you have the understanding and you look at things differently, it causes you to shift when you're thinking of 6 square feet, or you're thinking of 60 square feet, or you're thinking of 6 acres. Very, very different methods. So you have to be thinking differently in order to accomplish this. But it is doable, obviously. Just at that time, different ones solicited us for building sites, saying, I want a small piece of land on which to build. Cannot you sell me a lot? Ever since we settled here, such requests have been made of us. But I did not want many buildings and families crowded up close to my home. So she was not about, even in the country, to sell little chunks so everyone could have a little spot for their house. It was too close together. Going down here, not to consent to sell small lots and allow families to crowd in on every spare piece of uncultivated land. So we are not supposed to have a piece of property so small that every square inch of it is utilized for something. You need to have the extra leeway. You need to have this barrier, this uncultivated area, or else your kids, even if they want to go play in the grass and play in everything, you're going to be worried they're going to trample on something or do this or do that. They need to be able to go free and have space. Even people themselves, if you want to go for a walk, and you need to have this area that isn't overcrowded upon. Then here, I'm just going to jump to the bottom to make a point. In order to do this, I should have to borrow money. So they were looking at different pieces of land that were connected, and they wanted them all, or else it would be too small of a piece of property. And she was going to have to borrow money. But I do not think that the property ought to be allowed to pass into the hands of worldlings. So this is some people are asking, is it okay to borrow money in order to get a piece of property? And Ellen White did it many times. I had to do it. And I believe that that is something that is not against counsel, but you need to have a plan on how to pay that back as fast as possible, not to be waiting for 40 years in order to pay it off. You need to work towards it like debt is debt is the plague. And you need to be making sure you're getting out of it as fast as possible. Now, this slide we're taking a look at, it says here, Oakland, San Francisco, Sacramento, Woodland, and the large cities in the United States must hear the message of truth. So these are qualified as large cities, and let's see how big these large cities are. Oakland, between 10 and 34,000. That was classified as a large city. Sacramento, around 17 to 18,000. And that's a large city. Most people, when they think of large city, they think 10 times that amount. San Francisco, 150,000. Woodland, 100,000. This is what large cities are classified as. We should not be wanting to get anywhere near these cities. We're supposed to be as far as possible so that we're out of the influence of the wickedness that comes with all of these cities. Now, this gives you a different perspective of which cities you need to be away from, because maybe you thought New York, LA, Vancouver, all of these things. But that's not what's being talked about here. I just have to re-log in because I got kicked out of my session again. And I won't be able to see the questions when they come in. So now you have to be thinking, okay, these type cities, we need to be out of these cities. The workers connected with the publishing house must be closely guarded. Our young men and young women must not be placed where they will be in danger of being ensnared by Satan. And this is one of the very reasons that Amazing Discoveries moved, because we didn't want our people, our team members, to be close to the city or have to settle near the city. We want them to be able to settle outside of the city so that they could be following the counsel as well. And this is the responsibility of every ministry, to be out of the city, to not actually be encouraging their people to have to live in the city. As the years have passed by, the city has grown, and it is now necessary to establish the printing plant in some more rural place. Okay, this is a fascinating point, because that means if the cities grow and people spread, you may have to move again into some place farther, and then farther, and then farther. And that's been the case on the East Coast of the United States. The population has exploded, and the distance you could be from New York is now not even close to the same area. What was country is now full of high rises. So we have to be in consideration of always keeping the criteria. So once we've gone through and seen the full picture of criteria, if over the next 10, 20, 30 years, if Jesus didn't come, I do not believe that we won't be seeing events before 20 or 30 years. But if the situation was such and we had to move again, then we move again to be outside of that influence of the city. For instance, when Ellen White was writing some of this, Vancouver was only 1,000 people. In the lower British Columbia, it was only 1,000 people. So to be far enough out of there was not very far. But now it's 2 million or greater than 2 million people in the greater Vancouver area, and the distances have multiplied a ton. Now let's go to the bottom of the quote. They should have opportunity to obtain homes where they will be able to live without requiring high wages. So that's another thing. In the city, things are much more expensive. Property is much more expensive. Houses are much more expensive. And when you're in the country, people have a much better opportunity to actually obtain land. Be assured that the call is for our people to locate miles away from the large cities. One look at San Francisco, as it is today, would speak to your intelligent minds, showing you the necessity of getting out of the cities. And now people look at San Francisco and they think nothing of it. We have lost our understanding for the sinfulness of sin because we've been in contact with sin much too much. We need to be located miles from the large cities. And this is a funny one because people don't really know what miles means. If you're thinking in context of a vehicle, that's a few minutes to go miles. But if you're thinking about when they were using horses and oxen as the main transportation, they were going roughly about 2.5 to 3.5 miles per hour. That's it. That was the speed that you could travel. So now let's take that into context here and see what she says about distances. Talking about New York, but I am sure that any place within 30 miles of that city would be too near. 30 miles is too close to New York. Now, an average wagon pace of 3.5 miles an hour would make this distance 8.5 hours, and that's too close. We have such a low standard of how far we want to be out of the cities. This is too close to be 8.5 hours from a large city. And New York was not the size that it is today. Now, this is a place in California. It is 8 miles from St. Helena, which was very small. 8 miles, and it is free from city temptations. So they're 8 miles out of the city, the small town, and that was a good location. Average wagon pace of 3.5 miles an hour would make this distance 2.3 hours from a smaller city. And that was a good distance. This is the thing. We're so used to having the convenience. We want to drive 10 minutes, 5 minutes. We're not going to drive half an hour. We're not going to drive an hour. 2.3 hours. Never mind 8.5 hours being too close. So right now we're at around 6.5, 6 hours from the Lower Mainland, from Vancouver. We moved 6 hours north. And I feel this is a good distance. It's definitely not too far. You have to keep in context, the one principle is it needs to be far enough that it is difficult enough that it is a deterrent from actually going. Because when you go, you need to have a purpose, and you're trying to get that purpose done so you're not distracted by all the nonsense. You need to go with purpose, and you go with purpose, and you do what you need to do, and you go out. And this is the point. You're not supposed to go and dwell. So we need to be changing our mind frame. A lot of people want to be just out. You know, it's still 15 minutes into the city or 20 minutes in. That's not good enough. Not to a large city. Not to a large city. Minimum 2 hours from a large city. So now we're getting a very nice criteria. And if you guys want the list of the criteria, you can have it for free. All you have to do, go sign up to the newsletter, Prophecy newsletter. Go to our website. Go to finalcountdown.amazingdiscoveries.org, and you'll be able to sign up. You can also go to that website, and the study notes are there. If you sign up, you'll get the study notes just before we start the study every single week so that you can follow along. And you can highlight, you can scribble, you can do whatever you want there. And then if there's more Bible verses that come up, sometimes we go extra long and we get into a lot more topics, then you can add whatever you feel like on there. But then you have all the quotes and references available to you. Now, we're not going to discuss this in entirety, but I just wanted to hit on it because we're talking about criteria here. We need land, water, wood. These are the 3 pillars of a country property. How much land? There's a lot more questions that I normally give to this, but I nailed it down to just one per. How much land? How to get the water? You need water, but how are you going to get to it? Is it rain? Is it a well? I wouldn't recommend only rain. But rain, well, pond, creek, river, all of these things, how are you going to get it? And how are you going to get it in the winter time when things are frozen? All of these are important questions. How much land do you need to actually survive? That's really critical. And we have a slide about that coming up. Wood, how much wood? If you're burning and you're heating with your house, how much wood do you need to actually burn to keep warm? What if you need to build something? If you need a fence post, if you need to build a little shed, a shelter, whatever it is, a drying rack, handles for tools. So you need some branches, you need some little sapling trees, whatever it is. How much do you need? Very important question that needs to be asked. A lot of people aren't asking these questions. They're just making assumptions that this is going to manage, but they're not doing the math. Math doesn't lie. Now, from my study and experience, I see these areas as areas of a self-sufficient homestead. So we have garden and greenhouse. I think both of those are really important. I think if you can set up a greenhouse, that is incredible help, and I would not go without one. Absolutely, livestock, and again, you might disagree with me on some of these points, but I have tried to do this with reducing all of these out of the way and found that each one of these is critical, and a lot of the information under each of these is critical, which we're not getting into today specifically, but just to have them in your mind. Livestock, logging, food preservation, household essentials, whether that is cast iron cookware, whether that is tea kettles that you can just put on a wood cook stove, a wood cook stove itself, all of this, water system and storage. That is absolutely critical. Energy and power management, natural remedies. You better have an herb garden, your pharmacy, FARM, construction. What are your tools do you have? Do you have, bolts and screws and nails and things like this, chain, stuff like this that is going to be critical. Again, we're working on some courses, we're working on plans, we're working on all of these things so that it's all laid out. Here's what you need in order to make it work. Education. Do you have the knowledge in order to do this? And one great way is books. We actually have a bunch of books, and this is just a few of them that we actually offer here. Now, a great one is The Broken Blueprint. This little book talks about our schools and country property, and that agriculture needs to be connected to our schools and institutions. So I really recommend going through this little book here. This is Grow Your Soil. This is a great little book talking about how to actually build the microorganisms in your soil. Root cellaring, this is a critical one. Knowing how to preserve your food, whether it's turnips, potatoes, carrots, beets, all of these can be stored long-term, onions, in a root cellar. Now, there's many different ways to build a root cellar. Some people do it out of wood. Some people do it out of different things. We have found cement is actually fantastic. We have a very large root cellar. And if you're here and you go to join our farm apprenticeship program, you'll see that. We use the big highway, like Lego lock blocks, and stack those up around. We stay at a perfect temperature year round. It's absolutely awesome. So having a great root cellar, that's your fridge, your end time fridge. That's going to last you a long time. We have carrots and beets and turnips that are still viable now from last year. That's how long these things last. Another great book. It's called Seed to Seed. This book was a great help to me when I was learning how to save seeds, and was recommended to me by an older gentleman who has a seed company. He still has his seed company running that I trained with for a little bit and talked to him. So this is a fantastic resource, because if you can't buy seed, you need to be able to grow and harvest and save your own seed. These are such important skills that we all need to have, because without them, you can't grow anything. Emergency. that can cover a lot. Bandages, band-aids, um, charcoal, all of this. There's so many things that we can include there. Tensor bandages, um, even for doing CPR, the cups that go over your face and over the person's mouth that you can blow into if you have to do CPR. All of these things would be really, really good to have so that in case of emergency, we know what to do. Now, let's take a look at the size of a property. And don't be terrified by the numbers on the bottom of the screen. We'll explain them. Your garden, 5 acres. And someone's going to say, whoa, that is huge. Well, just hold on a second. Wood, 10 acres? Why do I need 10 acres of forest? Building area, 1 to 3 acres. Okay, fine. Roads, 1 acre. Pasture, 10 acres. 10 acres of pasture? Why do I need that? Pen/paddock, 1 acre, and root cellar. So let's just quickly break these down. We don't have a ton of time, but we're going to do quick review on these. 5-acre garden, why? Here's the thing. When you have a garden and you're in the wilderness, it's not yours only. It's also the deers and the rabbits and the everything else that likes to eat it. And the elk and the moose, the bears, all of those guys like your garden. So I highly recommend having an 8-foot deer fence to counteract that. Now, another thing is how much land does it take to feed one person? And maybe many people don't know this, but it takes 1 acre of land to produce food for one person for 1 year. 1 acre. That's 210 feet by 210 feet square. 43,000 square feet to produce 1 year of food for one person. Now, that's including your grains, your nuts, your beans, your greens, your potatoes, your all those things is included inside of that acre. So if you have a family of 4, then you need a 4-acre garden in order to be self-sufficient for an entire year, buying nothing, making your own soy milk or oat milk, or baking your own bread and having enough grain and growing the lentils and growing chickpeas to make hummus if you like that. I do. I like hummus. And for growing sunflowers, so you have sunflower seeds, for pumpkin seeds, for flax, so you can have omega-3s, because we have to be healthy. We can't just eat one thing and get sickly. And you need your carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And that takes 1 acre per person. So I would plan to have a 5-acre fenced area for my garden. That's what I would recommend. I know it sounds large, but that's what I would do. And I am doing. I'm not recommending anything that I wouldn't do or have not done personally. Okay? I want to make that clear. When I used to do a lot more medical missionary work and a lot more consultations and things like that, which I might start doing again because there's a lot of people needing health help. I never recommend something that I haven't done myself. So now wood. You need enough wood to heat your house. And on the East Coast, in the warmer area, they actually, and different people say different things. I talked to some people, I think it was in either Pennsylvania or one of these states around there, but the east side, closer to the ocean, where they were saying it takes 10 to 15 acres to have a sustainable wood lot to heat a home. Now, I put 10 acres. I do think that 10 acres is a great start. because on average, the average tree growth south to north, it doesn't really make that big of a difference, is 1 acre per cord per year. So just to kind of explain what that means, it takes average of 4 to 6 cords, doesn't matter where you live in America or Canada, to heat a home. 4 to 6 cords. And a cord is 4 feet high by 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. Okay, 128 square feet of wood. Cubic feet, 128 cubic feet of wood. 1 acre of trees will produce 1 acre of wood per year without you stripping everything back, so there's no more trees. Because if you take all of them, now the next year you're out of wood and you freeze. So let's say in your 1 acre, you need to harvest 2 trees, and there was 5 or 6 trees in your acre. Okay, just, I know there's more trees in an acre than 6, but now the next year, some start growing again. And then you take 2 or more trees, and then they catch up, and then the cycle continues. So in order to have 6 acres of trees, 6 cords of wood, a year, you need 6 acres of trees, plus another 4 acres for, if things don't grow well, or you need a fence post or 2, or, a tool handle or something like this. I would start with 10 acres of forest for the property. And again, this is Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark was not tiny. It was large enough for all the animals to join him. And this was to last 370 days without him even leaving the ark. And then he got out of the ark, and he still had to survive from the ark because nothing was growing. Nothing was on the land yet. So this is what we are preparing for. A building area, you want enough building area that if you need a shop, you need a shed, you need a, whatever it is. Pasture, 10 acres. It is really, really useful to have pasture land, even just to grow, beans and alfalfa, to put back on your garden for fertilizer, so you don't start taking and not adding back organic matter. A place for your animals to graze. I think having livestock on a farm is really important. They're useful in so many ways. Then pen paddock, an acre. That's a place that's closer to where your house is, so you can watch them. Maybe they're in there during the winter or something like this. Then a root cellar. And this would equal around 31 acres. Now, my personal recommendation is 40 plus acres. That would be my starting size, is 40 acres. There used to be a saying, the back 40, that was in reference to the back 40, meaning 40 acres. That was the homestead. 40 acre homestead, you could be self-sufficient with your family on 40 acres. So I recommend 40 plus acres for being able to actually do all these things and not be so crammed inside of it. And then you're able to actually function on an easier level. When you're trying to cram things on a tight scale, it's actually a lot more work than having a larger area. And people find that hard to imagine. There's a tiny little garden here, raised beds. It's so frustrating to try and keep clean of weeds and trying to do everything. It's way more work than the huge garden that is out in the field. And until you experience both, it's hard to see that, but it's actually way easier to do it bigger because the methods change. Everything changes with how you're doing that and how you can actually maintain it. So I would not deter anyone from getting 160 acres or 200 acres. Excuse me. The more, the merrier. If you don't use it now, that's okay. You'll use it later. But now you have a buffer zone for neighbors, a great buffer zone. You also have area that you can expand in. If people join you, as we're giving the loud cry and people are coming on, you have area to use. You have trees, you have land, you have all of this. So you don't want to start small. You don't want to. Now, if you're starting and you're in your transition phase, okay, that's different. City, you're renting maybe in the country or in a town somewhere, and now you're getting to a small piece of property, you're practicing, and then you're going to go from there to your if maybe God will take you city right to your final property, and that's amazing. If not, and God has you going in stages, but your goal should be this. Your goal should be right here. This, I think I'm pointing at it right there. The 40 acres is what you should be looking and aiming for, 40 and up. And it's not more expensive than a small piece of land. That's the crazy thing. Depending on the area you're looking. If you're looking in the wrong area, it's going to be expensive. But you want to look in an area where the land is not the price factor. In the time of trouble, when all fled. Now, this is to address a big point. Oh, there's going to be people in the cities right till the end. Ellen White says so. In the time of trouble, when all fled from the cities. See, there it is. She says, from the cities and villages. Okay. But were pursued by the wicked who entered the houses. So they fled from the cities and the villages to their homes in the country. This is what is left out. This is the rest of the story of the saints with the sword. They raised the sword to kill us, but it broke and fell as powerless as straw. If you obey God, you have his protection. And they fled the cities and the villages. So their homes weren't even in villages. Their homes were in the country because they're obedient to God's call. I guess that was the last slide. So again, let's just go back here. We have our property needs to be 40 plus acres. Plus, these are our criteria for where and what things need to be able to be done on this country property. This, I think, is one of the most useful of the studies that we've done so far. I mean, I've been putting a lot of effort into all these, and I hope they were all useful. But I was very excited about this one, giving you the exact criteria and layout and showing you systematically what that looks like, and then putting it all together in what this property or our antitypical arc actually needs to look like to survive the no buy, no sell time frame. So I think now it is time for us to go to questions. And I have a feeling there is a few. So we're going to go to the questions now. Okay. So the first question is from Robin McIntosh. And the question is, do you believe that no buy and selling is before or after probation closes? Good question. And that's a very easy one to answer. And the answer is before. Why? Because it is connected to the mark of the beast. And the mark of the beast is something that people have to decide one or the other. So probation's open, they're making decisions. So this is something that we're going to see, I think, very soon, especially with all things happening around the world right now. We're going to see this incredibly soon. So this is definitely before probation closes. And if you haven't already, go back to some of the previous final countdown studies, start the beginning and work your way all the way forward. I know you'll be blessed by it. And that'll give you a much, much more in-depth answer of showing you exactly where that sits in the timeline, but is definitely before probation closes. Okay. Stusef Smallwood. Wouldn't the beast force everyone into the 15-minute cities? I don't see that in the Bible. I don't see that said in the Bible. I know that the beast will try to enforce things on God's people, but that does not mean that God's people will be forced into 15-minute cities unless they did not heed the counsel and did not leave the cities in time. And for that, Ellen White has a quote that says that there will be people who wish to leave, but it is too late, that they are unable to leave, even though they would like to. And that is not what God wants for us. He wants us to be able to get out, and He wants us to be ready for these things. Do they want to set up these 15-minute cities? Absolutely, they do. But we need to be out before that gets in place so that we can be ready and not affected by these things. Okay. Lexi Swanson. Lexi Swanson has a question. I'm interested in country land, but live in California. We have ministries out here that we are called to. We are in the Central Valley area. Any specific advice for this region? Much appreciated. So it's a little hard for me to know every single area of every single place. I do know California a little. Now, I know that people are often called to ministries in certain areas and minister in certain areas. One of the things we have to remember is that part of our ministry is telling people of what's going to happen to the cities. And that's one of the direct quotes Ellen White says. And you should look this up. I believe I can find it quickly, I think, in the book Countryliving. We actually talked about this a few days ago. Let me just find this really quickly. I think it's on page 29. Let me see. 20 starts on page 29. As far as possible. Now, I'm going to skip down. Okay, let me go down here. No, it's on page 30. I'm sorry. It's on page 30. The cities are to be worked from outposts. Said the messenger of God, shall not the cities be warned? Yes, not by God's people living in them, but by their visiting them to warn them of what is coming upon the earth. So why are you going to the city? You're going to the city to warn them of what's coming upon the city. That's the purpose. And we've forgotten our purpose. Our purpose is to warn people of the coming events. Look at Revelation 14, verse 9 to 12. That third angel's message is about warning people not to receive the mark of the beast and not receive the plagues. Revelation 18 is the fourth angel's message. Come out of the cities. All of this, we're supposed to warn people to leave the cities. And by us doing that and then leaving, we're an example, just like Noah was. Every blow of the hammer was a witness to the people. And people will notice. When you're ministering there, you need to be telling them of the truth. And the truth is the cities will be destroyed. The coastlines will move in. There's going to be earthquakes. There's going to be all these things. And especially in California, with all the fault lines, these things are going to be direct targets for God's judgment. And California is not the most righteous of the states. So we need to be warning people. And I do recommend, even if you can, go to a place for a short period of time, even if it's like coming up here, and you can experience the country, you can learn what it means, you can see places, you can study with other people. I think this is a really, really good idea to start getting familiar with what country living looks like and familiar with the criteria. Do I have any specific advice for your specific region? I would just look at the criteria, and out of the cities as fast as possible. That's what I would recommend, because that's what we're told by the spirit of prophecy and by the Bible. Okay. Stusef, don't you need internet to do homeschooling? Don't you need internet to do homeschooling? No, you don't need internet to do homeschooling. Absolutely not. I would recommend people don't use internet to do their homeschooling. I would get a program that is book or text or DVD or something like this. I know that's going backwards, but that's what we're supposed to be doing. That way, we do not have any temptation to our children to be involved with this stuff. Not until they're old enough to understand, until they're old enough to be introduced and have already been talked to about all the different things. So no, you don't need internet. Actually, there's several different ways that you can do that. Homeschooling is a very fascinating topic, not something that we could get into in this stream right now. I was homeschooled, and we did not need internet to do the homeschooling. And I would recommend everybody to homeschool their children. Never, ever would I recommend anyone not to do anything but that, unless you're a terrible parent. But then that would, that's a totally different thing. Definitely homeschooling is the best. Will we be able to barter during the end times? That's a fascinating one. And it says we cannot sell at any price. Now, what is trading? Trading goods. This is buying and selling. Whether you're trading silver or gold or paper or food or wood or anything, that is buying and selling. There's going to be a like an embargo on God's people. They're going to be not able to do this. Why would someone barter with you when they're taking the mark of the beast and you are not, and they are told that they will be punished if they help you, and that you are being punished for going against the system? You are the main problem. They're not going, what do you have to even barter with them? They can buy and sell still. They're still being supported by the system. What do you have that they would want anyways? Nothing. You're needing all of this. So relying on bartering, I wouldn't. I definitely would not. We're supposed to be self-sufficient. That's what I read in counsel. Bonnie, good advice. We can't buy land without any funds. So what do we do? Actually, you can. You can buy land without funds. I know people who've been gifted land because they have looked after it. I know if you pray, God will give you for whatever you have. I keep bringing up this story, but there was a lady, she left Florida, and she sold everything she had and packed it in her car, and she had $11,000. And she went driving away, and she ended up passing this property and felt impressed by God. This is the one that you're supposed to have. So she went, found the owner. I'm making a long story short. She offered him the $11,000. He laughed and said, "This I could sell for $350,000 right now." And she said, "Okay, well, keep my offer in mind." A week later, she gets a call, and he says, "Do you still have that $11,000?" And she says, "Yes." He said, "My accountant did some mistakes, and if I don't have $11,000 to the bank tomorrow, I lose all of my homes that I have. And so if you have $11,000, you have a home." And she got that house for $11,000. And it didn't end there. She got a dream that she was supposed to find this store, and she found that it was in another state. She went there. She asked for the owner, and the owner said, "I've been waiting for you, and I seen you in a dream, and I'm supposed to help you." And he, for free, furnished and finished her entire house. This is a long story made short, but it is an example. Now, that's not everyone's story. That wasn't my story. Okay. I have to pay and I have to painstakingly work for all the things that I'm doing and I have, and it's a slow building process. But God can work miracles if we just move. We're not moving. He can't part the sea unless you step in it. Look at, Jesus healed those men and he said, go and show them. Go show the priests. And as they went, they were healed. It's in obedience that God makes the way, not beforehand. So my advice, do what you can, move, start renting in the country. Then find a place that you can maybe rent to own, or start saving, or start being industrious, or pray, all of the above. You need to do everything you can to secure your ark. It says, the Bible says, and Ellen White says, that Noah put all of his money and all of his effort into the ark. Everything you have should be going into this, because that's how bad the time of trouble is that we're going to be facing. Okay. Saved by grace. Question. I got a question. This quote from SOP is directing SDA people that we should have our institutions out of the cities. But there's another quote where she said that we shouldn't move from the cities, but work in the cities, and that we should have center of evangelism in the cities. So is that not a contradiction or confusing? Help me, please. Now, my answer to this question, if you didn't already, I believe it was our last study titled I Investigated Countryliving by Ellen White. Take a look at that presentation, the last study. We go through this because some of what you're asking here right now is answered there. Because something that you might be missing is the dates and the signs that have happened between the first statements and the last statements. The signs of 1888. This is why you're a little bit confused. Also, the types of institutions, the types of things, there's a lot of context, and I would need to see all the quotes that you're referencing to actually properly give you an answer for that. But I'm pretty sure if you go take a look at the last study, that's going to answer your question. So thank you for that. In the studio with Tess. I'm in a rural area, but my neighbors are not Christians. Should I move? Well, how far are your neighbors? That's a big question. If they're, a stone's throw from your house, it's probably a good idea to move. Is your property 40 plus acres? If not, maybe you should move. And, follow down the criteria. If they are hostile, it's definitely probably a good idea to move. And, not everyone will agree with me, but I have to say what my conviction is personally, and I'm trying to be as honest with all of you as I possibly can. And I'm not pulling any punches. I mean, I'm just saying it like, if you were family and this was what I was recommending, that's what I would recommend. Go through the list of criteria we went through. And if you're questioning, then maybe you should be thinking about moving, as long as it is breaking some of those criteria. Okay, Wing Ying Chan. Hello, MacKenzie. Is there Bible counsel about buying property in city as a church, worship place, and center of influence? So we have a quote here from Evangelism 377. In every city where the truth is proclaimed, churches are to be raised up. In some large cities, There must be churches in various parts of the city. In some places, meeting houses will be offered for sale at reasonable rates, which can be purchased advantageously. Also, in the book Country Living, if you do not have this, go to our website, not now, after Sabbath, and get yourself one of these booklets and highlight it up. Now, it talks about the different institutions for the cities, and churches is one of them. But what that means is that the people of God are not living in the cities. They're traveling. They're trading places. They're not living in that city as they're doing that. Plus, as time progresses, those are going to be fewer and fewer in the large cities. So this is actually a move away. And as time progresses, our ministry from the big cities will be more as satellites going in, doing the work, and coming out instead of setting up shop. So we need to take all the quotes in context and see the progression of events, because we do not want to be affected by the judgments that are coming. Edgar Williams, also, do you think that we are going to be left alone? Also, do you think that we are going to be left alone? Wouldn't you think that we will be hunted down like the Waldenses? Well, maybe that was said before I read my last quote, but if we are obedient and we have our homes in the country, we will be protected. We absolutely will be protected from these things. And yes, we're going to be persecuted. We're going to be brought before the courts and before kings, and we're going to have to attest to these things. This great slaughter of martyrs that people talk about, I don't see it. I don't see it in the Bible. And, some are going to have different tests, but we need to be obedient to the command, which is to get out. And the sooner we do that, the less we'll be affected by all of these things. And our job is to be obedient. That's what our job is. And God will protect our country property in the process. Alina, not everyone can buy land. So why don't churches buy the land to grow food for their members? Well, everyone can buy land. And what I mean by that is everyone can be on a country property. And maybe it's not yours, maybe it's with someone else. And the reason the churches can is because churches are a 501c3. They're a nonprofit charitable organization, which means that as soon as Sunday law comes, they're owned by the government. And that is not a good idea to rely on a ministry or on a church to grow the food for you. You are supposed to, that is your job. And if you don't have the money or the ability, partner with someone, help them. Put all your effort that you can to doing this. And it's totally possible. I've seen so many miracle stories that there is no reason people can't be in the country. If they can be in the city, they can be in the country. It's just that simple. So growing the food from a church, that's not going to be a possible solution, unfortunately, as much as I would love that to be the case. Even with amazing discoveries, relying on the institution to go through, not a good idea. Even in the counsel we read today, go back to the quotes. She says our institutions should be in the country so people can have the opportunity to buy their own homes and enable them to prepare for what's coming. AJ Friedberg, I'm reading GC 631 regarding that last slide, and it doesn't say the faithful were fleeing to the country properties. This in the time of trouble, and it says God's angels protect them. Well, the quote I read does include that they were fleeing the cities and the villages and going to their going to their homes, which was outside of those things. And here's the thing: if we read it all in context, she doesn't have to say that, because we already know that God's people are going to be obedient. Like in 70 AD, God said that when you see this, flee into the mountains and live in the mountains. And it was years before the siege came back. So they were living there for a while before the Roman armies came. And Ellen White says that not one Christian perished. And that's because they all heeded the call to go to the mountains. And when it says that people are going to be fleeing from the cities, that's because they were doing medical missionary work in the close cities that they could access. And the people that they could access from wherever their property was, traveling in to where they could and going back out to their properties. We have to take it in the proper context. Because if we say that some are required to do this, so salvation is different for two different people, why did someone have to prepare then at all? Why didn't just all not prepare and they would have the same fate? Or why did Noah have to build a boat and someone else didn't have to build a boat? Obviously, if you wanted to survive the flood, you had to be in the ark. That was the only option. And that's the same thing with what we're talking about in the final events. Okay. Our little farm, how do we keep our young children with us if our unbelieving spouse refuses to move to another province? And what if our kids refuse to leave their other parents? Should we stay to care for children? This is a really hard question to answer because it is extremely personal, something that you have to pray and pray and pray about. I'd be taking my kids to the country. And yes, they will want to be with the other spouse, other parent, but I would explain to them why it is not a good idea and why we need to be obedient to God, and God will bless that. And you need to explain that to them. You can't just leave them wondering, why did you do this? Oh, because we have to. Not just because we have to. You need to walk them through it. You need to show them. You need to explain to them. And that we're trying to be obedient to God. That is something you really have to pray about. And God will show you the right time. And you can go to bring them back to the other parent to visit or whatever you need to do. I don't know your situation. But you need to live by example. You have to do what God asks, and that is a huge witness to your children. You don't do wrong to do right. It's a tough situation, and I feel for you and pray for you. God will show you. You need to pray hard and say, Lord, I want to be obedient. I need to know what to do here. And He will give you the answer. I know that 100%. As long as you're willing to do anything that He asks, He will show you. David Jeffrey, what do you recommend for those who live in the Caribbean islands that are flat without mountains? If it doesn't suit the criteria, move. And I'm probably the first person to be that blunt and say something like that. But Abraham had to move countries. And if you have to move countries because your country doesn't fit the criteria, then get out of the country. Move from the island. We're told that islands will be removed. They'll disappear because of the judgments of God. And I don't want to be on one of those islands that disappears. So we need to be considering all of these statements and bringing them all together and realizing that God means what He says. And He's telling you ahead so that you can be ready. He's not telling you ahead so that He can put a miracle bubble on you. And I'm being really, really serious right now, but I would be praying, Lord, help me to find a way out. That's what I would pray. And God will show you and He will help you because He doesn't ask you to do anything He won't help you with. And that would be my recommendation. We have to heed the counsel. I mean, we're told, the Bible's clear, and If Lot stayed in Sodom, he would have died with them. And I don't want that for you. So I would recommend that you move. That's what I would recommend. Patricia Woodruff. Patricia, is there flat land in the mountains? The answer is yes, because you're not going to build on the side of a cliff. You're being close to the mountains, but you don't want to be so sheltered in that you have no sunlight, you can't grow anything. You're trying to be in the areas where there's arable land close enough to the mountains that you can flee into the mountains if you need to. So that doesn't mean that you want 100 acres of cliffs. You want 100 acres of arable land, 40 acres of arable land, flat land that is not far from the mountains. Good question. Okay. I think we'll take one more question. Kat, how do you go to the mountains when you're physically disabled? Can't go to the ark. Look, hearing, and watching comments. Perhaps should pray for death. I'm 68 plus. I would hope you don't need to pray for death. God has a way. And I know that Noah would have pushed someone in a wheelchair onto the ark if that's what he had to do. And if you pray, asking, God will show you exactly what needs to happen. And I don't know how far away we are from Sunday law. I don't know, because we're in time no longer. Could it be a year? Could it be 10 years? Could it be 20 years? I have no idea. Pray for death? Absolutely not. No, that is not what we should be praying for. We need to pray to have faith and trust and obedience. And if you're saying, Lord, I don't know how I'm able. How am I able to do this? What am I able to do? And you ask him, he will help you. Look at the children of Israel, when they were leaving Egypt, they were leaving the city to go into the country. Do you not think there was some people who are maybe in a similar situation as you? But God helped all of them leave Egypt. He didn't leave some behind because they were too young, too old, too this, too that. No, he brought everybody. And he made sure that as long as you wanted to be faithful, you had a way. God has a way. You pray, you act in faith, you do what you can, and he will help you. Absolutely. I have no doubt in my mind. You just pray and you act in faith, and he will get you where you need to go. So I want to thank everyone for joining us for this study. And really consider all the things that we've gone over, all the criteria, all the details. And if you haven't already, go back to the first study, please. Everybody that's here, if you haven't, go back to the first study and work your way forward. It is really, really important that you understand the flow of events that are taking place, and we're building. So you're missing things by jumping in the middle. You need to go back, and by next week, hopefully you've caught up all the way. I know that sounds like a lot, but if you can start to look back at some of those videos, it'll be really helpful in going through the resources. Get all the study notes, and you can look at the quotes. We are trying our best to share with you how to get ready, because this is a real time of trouble that we're going to face. And I've been preparing my entire life that I can for this time, and trying to get to the point that we can teach people in a short amount of time what they need to do to prepare for this Sunday law, this no buy, no sell, this time of trouble also that is coming. And there's a lot to it. That's why we have our farm apprenticeship program, farm.amazingdiscoveries.org, where you can join here on the farm and learn how to do all the things that we're doing here. If you haven't seen, go to our How to Country channel on YouTube. If you just type in How to Country, it'll show up. And we have been doing things for the public. This is a fantastic ministry opportunity. If you want to move to the country and start a market garden where you're bringing vegetables to people, that's a great way to ministering to their physical needs. Then you can tell them, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you growing this like this? We're doing this self-sustainably. We're doing this like this. We're doing this organically. All of these things. Don't use the word organic. You might get in trouble. But naturally and without chemicals, all these things, unless you're certified organic. But all of these things need to be learned. How do we properly care for a forest? If we have our 10-acre forest, without killing everything off, how do we make sure that we have regrowth of the trees so that it's a constant self-sustainable supply? How do we use the animals in a productive way that we can actually have it on the farm? All of these things we're going over. We're working on courses, work on presentations, all of this, just so that we can train people to be ready so that they can come here, learn, and go and teach others and go and show and do in their area what God is asking them to do. Because we're all called to be like Noah. We're all called to build an ark, and we're all called to preach the three angels' messages and give that final cry, which is, come out of her, my people, so ye be not partakers of her sins. Thank you very much. God bless, and we will see you in the next study.